Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
Welcome, everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. I am a recovering political hack, a recovering lawyer, having spent many years working in politics, including as a speechwriter with stints working in the Clinton White House for a California governor. I also spent years practicing law in Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area. And in 2010, I discovered this medium, the medium of podcasting. I've been doing it ever since. Over 10 years of hosting this show, I've had the privilege to talk with top CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies and organizations, ranging from YPO to EO, Activation Blizzard, Landing Street, OpenTable, FreshBooks, and many more. And today, I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses with the strategy and production they need to create podcasts that produce content marketing and tremendous ROI and connects them with their ideal prospects and referral partners. And first, before introducing today's guest, I want to give a big shout out to Louis Schiff, who connected me with today's guest. Louis is the chairman of Birthing of Giants. Check him out at birthingofgiants.com, also a past guest on this show. And my guest is Ray Carballada. Ray is the managing director and CEO of AmpiFLY, which is a next stage evolution video production company. They combine new technologies, data strategy, and product research to help companies use video content to reach new customers. So we're going to talk all about that. They produce branded video using a combination of video, virtual reality, augmented reality, and entertainment content for brands. He's also an accomplished strategy, operations, and production executive, and he's worked in all kinds of different worlds, including motion pictures, TV, advertising, social, and online media. And before AmpiFLY, he actually led transformation growth of Alchemy X, which was a small video production company, into a fully integrated $35 million creative content company. He also developed and sold the first reality TV show to air on the Food Network, Restaurant Impossible. So we'll ask him all about that and more about his background. First, before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media. Rise 25 helps B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. If you're listening to this and you've ever thought, should I start a podcast? Well, I say yes, you absolutely should. It's one of the best things I've ever done for my business and for me personally. And we specialize in helping B2B businesses with the right strategy and the behind-the-scenes team to make sure that you get a really great ROI from that initiative. So to learn more and get inspiration and ideas on how to get clients, referrals, and some of the best friendships of your life from a podcast, go to Rise 25 Media or email us at support@rise25media.com. All right, Ray, I'm excited to talk to you. You got an amazing background here, and you started it all at this iconic company, Campbell's Soup, and you developed the first in-house ad agency and production services department, which is amazing to think that such an iconic company didn't have that at all. What was it like building that within such an iconic American company?
Well, it was, interesting. They had just brought in a new CEO, David Johnson, who really turned the company around. He was the first, pretty sure he was the first outside CEO that wasn't part of the family that owns Campbell's. So he was making a lot of demands, and they, on the company overall, and part of it was, trying to really look at things very differently. They had a design department to design, labels and things like that. And this department I took over was really a photography department. It did photography and some presentations and things like that. And the goal was to really provide a much more of an in-house kind of agency to work primarily with a lot of brands that didn't have agencies behind it, like Open Pit, Marie's, things like that. And then we also, were involved in a lot of market research. The amount of test commercials that I did for Campbell's, you wouldn't believe. I mean, some of the things that were going on. Actually, that's how I sort of got my start of looking at data differently too, because I used data way back then too.
That's pretty early, yeah.
Yeah. So, so it was an interesting, job, and actually, I learned, I learned more about business there, or it actually put everything together for me in business by working at Campbell's, because I ended up being very involved in the board and strategy presentations there, helping write them and present them and things like that. And, you know, David Johnson, the CEO, was a self-made guy from Australia. So, you know, he'd call me into his office. I can remember the first time he called and said, "Hey, Ray, come on, I want to talk to you about my presentation to Wall Street." And I called up my boss and said, "David called me." He goes, "Yeah, I know. He told me he was going to call you. Go talk to him." And since then, you know, I mean, since that happened,
what was that pressure like? What was that pressure like being called up to the boss's office?
Well, you know, luckily my father, who's a big mentor of mine, has been very successful in the banking business in upstate New York. And, you know, my father always taught me everybody is the same, you know, and be honest with everybody, tell them what you think, you know, work hard and you're going to be fine. So, you know, I didn't have anything to lose with the CEO. I would tell him when I liked something, and I would tell him when I didn't like something. And he actually really respected that. And he told me one time, he says, "I wish some of the people that work for me directly would be as straight with me as you are, because I know some of this stuff." But he taught me a lot about business and what to do and things like that. He was, and several other the executives there. So it had a really big impact on my career. I would say it was the best and the worst job I ever had, because the work that I had to do, and that not only starting that department and then getting involved in all these, you know, all these presentations that had a huge impact on the company. And the last thing I did there was present a strategic plan to Wall Street analysts in New York City, and they stopped the trading of the stock because it was going up so much during the presentation. So needless to say, that was
Wow.
That was a good way of leaving.
Yeah,
when that was happening. That was a good way of going out, was with that one. You know, but I enjoyed it. You know, I enjoyed it. And it was you know, there were a lot of challenges back then, you know, with the company, but the company was really evolving, and it was a good time to go to a company where then there's a lot of change going on. You know, there's a lot of change. I like being in that kind of environment. So,
So you'd been with a smaller company previously, then you go to this massive 17,000 employee company, and then you move on, you go to Alkemy X, which was a smaller company at the time. And
right,
what fueled that decision? Why did you decide to go to a much smaller company?
You know, I thought I had done some work at this company, you know, and, you know, one of the owners approached me and said, "Hey, we've been around for 15 years. We're not growing. Our sales are going down. You know, would you like to come in and, you know, help us run the company?" And, yeah, we had some conversations, and I thought they had a lot of potential. They were really good with technology and really good at the things that they were doing. And they were, you know, committed to take all the profits that were made from the company going forward and reinvest them back in the company to scale the company. So that was really interesting to me. And, you know, also I thought that there were definitely some opportunities in the Philadelphia market at the time. So it was, I think it was time. Plus, you know, I didn't expect to be there as long as I was, but the company was growing and scaling and doing well. So, you know, I stayed. And also there are some personal reasons why I stayed in Philadelphia too at the time. So, but it was you know, honestly, everything that I was doing because the original name of the company was Shooters, which we rebranded into Alchemy, was really just applying a lot of the strategies that I worked on or communicated with or were involved with at Campbell's. A lot of it was the same stuff, was just packaged differently for a smaller company.
Right.
Almost everything was the same.
Yeah.
You know, the tools are the same. They're just reformatted into something else slightly.
Yeah. And so you're there 18 years. You take it from 2.5 million to 35 million.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow. What do you think was the key to all that growth? Any particular individual things you want to highlight? You mentioned technology was one of them, opportunities in the Philadelphia area.
Well, one of the things is that the industry was changing, and, you know, my really strategy was to try to look forward and try to, not fight that change, sort of ride the wave. And that worked out really well for us by doing that. I mean, there was a brand new technology coming around related to the production of television commercials. We invested in that, built our own, sales force. I think that's a lot of it, honestly. Our sales force that we built really had a big impact on that growth. There wasn't a lot of companies that really used traditional kind of sales forces in that industry. It still aren't. They still, sales
Usually
is sort of.
so the owner is the seller, the one who's doing the sales. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not secondarily. And then, we used operational leverage so that we could use more of our profits that we were making to scale into closely related businesses. I would look at, if I had, some resources that I was using at 60%, if I could get those to 100% capacity by expanding into a slightly different business that's closely related, aligned, then we could scale even faster.
What are some examples of that?
An example that would be is, you talked about, we launched a visual effects business because we were in the very high end compositing for commercials, which is very similar to the visual effects business. But you can talk about, you want to talk about Food Network a little bit. There's a great example too, is we had capacity, we had editing capacity, we had shooting capacity. We had capacity to be able to do shows. We just didn't have some of the expertise that we needed to do those shows. So that's when I went out and we signed a partnership with Mark Summers, who was also very involved with the Food Network, to provide that. So Mark and I worked together.
So this is funny, but I actually worked with Mark Summers also. I didn't even know we had that connection. When I was in college, I worked on a DreamWorks. It was one of DreamWorks' first projects. It was it was a game show that he co-hosted with Arthel Neville of the Neville family. It didn't last very long, but great guy, wonderful guy.
Yeah. So we found Robert Irvine through another person. We found Robert, and the original pilot that we were pitching was called. It wasn't called Dinner Impossible. I can't remember what it was called, but we did a sizzle with him and presented it to the network. The network was really interested in it. The challenge that we had was because it was the first reality television show that Food Network had ever produced. They were used to producing their cooking shows that would be done in 2 weeks. It would take 2 weeks. Now it took us, 4 months to produce one show. So obviously the budgets were significant compared to what they wanted to spend. So what we did, which was interesting and turned out really well for us, is that we deficit financed the first season in return for, I think, 15 seasons of international rights. So we retained the international rights for taking the risk up front. That turned out to be about a 900 ROI on that investment. Wow. 900%. So we did, and that was pure profit. If you think about it, it was pure profit.
Because you're just
we have to give it.
It's all done.
So it worked out great, and that ended up that whole division over 12 years, 15 years total sales, not per year, but during that time probably generated $65 million worth of revenue for the company over a 10, 12 year period.
Wow.
So it was really worked out really well. And the investment that we made was actually very de-risked because it was the post-production, and we had the equipment, we had the people to do it. So other than paying some overtime here and there, it really wasn't costing us anything to do it. If you think about it. Yeah. Some people say, but if you have capacity and you can invest and create an asset that you can make money off of, it worked out really well for us.
So, a lot of my listeners are curious about the relationships that you build along the way, especially key partners, key strategic partners, key referral partners, that sort of thing. So you mentioned Mark Summers. How did that relationship come about? Of course, he was, we're talking about the same Mark Summers from Double Dare, Nickelodeon,
Yep.
right? Okay, good. So how did that come about? Was he already doing stuff with the Food Network at that point when you connected up with
Yes,
him?
he was
Okay.
already a host on the Food Network. Double Dare actually started in Philadelphia.
Oh,
too.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
or it was, pretty sure it was shot in Philly.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty sure it was. So Mark had a connection to Philadelphia, which were some of the producing people that I knew, plus one of the owners knew Mark from college too.
Okay.
So, somehow it got word out that we were trying to develop shows, because this was the second show that we were trying to develop. Actually, this show with Robert Irvine. So Mark called me up, we got together, we talked about it, and it gave us, from my standpoint, it gave us instant credibility with Food Network, because he, it really helped because he had relationships there and things like that. And it also helped Mark. It helped Mark because we were, at the time we were, not a small production company at that point. I would say that we're probably, I don't know, probably 15 million, maybe a little less than that at the time when we launched that show.
But had you done any reality TV shows at that point?
We were further down the food chain. So we were a production company that would work for companies like Banyan and others that produce TV shows. We would work for them as a vendor.
Got it.
But what happened also too is that, that industry, because of technology changing, the production companies that were producing shows didn't need to go to a company anymore to get the work done, because the technology was cheaper, it was easier to run, it was, all that kind of stuff. So they started essentially, competing with their vendors, I guess you want to look at it. And what we did as a vendor, we just moved up the food chain.
You competed with them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But you used the Mark Summers relationship to help you get them into the door, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then tell me about some of the other challenges you had along the way. I'm sure you had many challenges, going from 2.5 million to 35 million. What were some of the different, struggling points or challenges that you experienced along the way, building the company up during that time?
Staffing, I guess you would say, is always a challenge. Also,
was it harder being in a market like Philadelphia versus New York or Los Angeles, which is known more for media production, or is it easier to get good talent?
Yeah, it's harder. It was harder at the time. So you would have to, if you wanted to go out and try to hire a talent out of New York, you'd have to overpay for it to work out of Philadelphia. Yeah. Or you'd have to pull a B talent in from New York and pay them an A talent salary. So, we looked at more of we were totally vertically integrated, which was different also at the time. Everybody's doing it now, but we were really early about having everything as much as possible in-house. And that allowed us to be very profitable, to be able to scale by using that, but it also allowed us to control the creative process better. So even though we didn't have potentially all the great people that they had, we were just better and more connected and more communicative and stuff like that. So it just helped when it came from that. But the other thing would be is that you reach a point as you're growing every once in a while where things sort of feel like they're going off the rails. Things start to get uncomfortable. You start, you might miss deadlines. You might have stuff fall through the cracks and things like that. And the challenge, I think, in any company, or especially, creatively driven companies or companies that are trying to be innovative, you could even say, is putting enough infrastructure to what I would say is to remove the flack, to allow people to start focusing again on what got them there, but not so much that it becomes like a treadmill where they're dealing with the processes too much, not so much with what they're actually there to do. So that's a challenge, I think, when you're scaling a company, is you do have to take steps where you actually put in more infrastructure to become more of a company. Or, as I would say, is when you're running a startup that's scaling really fast, I mean, it's like the MacGyver stage. No matter what it is, you're going to figure it out and it'll get done. Well, that only gets you so far when you start getting if you really want to sort of get to the next level, you have to sort of move. You have to have some discipline in some areas, and then build the playbook too is something else that was a challenge, is that eventually you'll learn, just because you think a certain way and things looks fairly obvious to you or simple to you and things like that. Not everybody that works for you thinks that way, else they'd be running another company somewhere.
Right.
So you have to take time to build the playbook and explain to people the things that you're good at. But the other side is, hiring really smart people and letting them do what they do. I think that, CEOs and people, chief operating officers, or whatever you want to say, they really work for their employees. You have to look at it that way. They work for their employees. The employees don't work for them, because the employees work for the customer. Right. So, it's a totally, and I know a lot of people running companies that don't necessarily think that way. And I think it limits them, and it limits their ability to scale and grow. So.
It's such an interesting challenge. I was up until about 11 o'clock my time last night, 1 o'clock my business partner's time last night, because we were doing this exact thing where, we've got a team of about 20 right now, and we were going through and kind of going through our steps in our process. And on the one hand, I kind of feel like many of our team members know the process better than we do. But on the other hand, I felt like as the owners of the business, we had an obligation to iron out the process, because we're kind of we're using Asana, which, for project management right now. And so we felt like we had to take it and get it to a point of like kind of 90% there. And then we'll turn it over to our team and say, okay, you guys make this even better. So talk a little bit about, that kind of challenge as you grow, as the company gets larger, how you manage to, dictate or lay out a process for your team, even at the point where, you're not as familiar with those different processes. And it could be in various different areas. It could be in sales, it could be in production, it could be in HR or whatever.
Well, part of it was, really speaking with them and communicating with them, and really, if you're constantly involved in talking to your key people, even people that you might not report to you, trying to communicate them and talk to them and things like that. Not only you know what's sort of going on within the company, but I think it's important when you're thinking about things or thinking about moving things forward, to get their input and get their say and hear what they think about stuff. But, once you get that culture going where you're winning and you're growing and you're doing great work, and, the management is paying attention to the customers, it just sort of takes on a life of its own. I think part of the challenge is, part of the thing that, I used to do, I used to tell people when I didn't know something. I would go in and sit down with my engineer, who is one of the most brilliant engineers that I've ever met, who was extremely smart. And I'd start asking him questions. And luckily, people don't think about this, but I have a photography degree in addition to a business degree. But photography, when I took it, was very technical. Chemistry, optics, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty comfortable with technology, and I was able to ask him enough questions that I could make a business case for what we were trying to do. And then he would help me with that. I didn't want to understand the nuances of, new computer network we were putting in, or new technology we were bringing in, or new software we were going to bring in. My goal was to figure out how it fit the market. Did it fit the marketplace, and could I sell it? And could I set up a sales plan to sell it? And could we hire the people to run it and things like that? So I think that's part of it, is understanding what you don't know, and it's okay not to know everything, but know where your sweet spot is and how you really move, what value you bring to the company, really to empower those areas that you can. The other challenge, I think, is I'm sure you might have heard of this book, which I think is great. It's called No Man's Land. I don't know if you've read this book, but you should, if you're scaling. It essentially talks about, as you grow as a company, you get to a point where you have to invest. So your profits have to go down. You have to put money into the company to get to the next level. It's sort of like a deep valley you need to go to jump over. You got to do that. And you can make a decision that you're not going to do that. That's fine. But if you want to continue to scale and grow, you have to invest. Either that's more people, more technology, more locations, more marketing, whatever it is, you have to do that. So, understanding that and communicating that to everybody involved, that's what we're trying to do, or that's where we're going, I think was important. The other challenge, and this I think is really relevant today, and was living it, when this happened, when, film really went away and everything went to digital, it went very quickly because it happened really during the recession. It's also where digital advertising really took off, is that a lot of companies still think, okay, when the business starts going away or when things start going on, then I'll really start paying attention to it. With digital technology now, which is really the biggest impact on every company, primarily on the distribution side, but sometimes on the production side, it's a digital cliff. It's not a gradual decline. You're going to, and I've, before, I was doing some consulting too for a while. Companies just didn't, some of them got it and some of them didn't. It was just like they were really struggling very quickly. Went from doing fine to, 12 months later, really having a tough time. So it's something that was a challenge, that technology was moving so quickly. How do you invest in technology? What are you going to do with it? What's your strategy behind it? Because it's not only just getting the technology in, but when are you going to get it out, and when are you going to bring in the next thing, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And also, I do feel in our industry that really the value is moved from the actual technical process. I'd say, the technical process of producing content has been commoditized by technology. You can just look at your iPhone. That's
right.
That's a $250,000 camera, 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
With what it does. So
yeah. My father worked in local TV news when I was growing up, and I remember, the cameramen would have these massive cameras that give them all kinds of back problems because they're so heavy, and right. I remember him saying, this is like, the 80s and 90s and stuff like that. He was like, that's $100,000 camera,
right.
And now what's in your phone is better than that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's just, it's, and the thing about it is, yes, the optics, storage and that kind of stuff, but the software is really what makes it. Autofocuses, color balance, all the things that it does. Those are things that you used to have to know technically how to do. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows how to do that anymore. Some people do,
yeah.
But the real super high-end film guys or people shooting movies understand a lot of that stuff or understand all that stuff. But when's the, you can use this and look at this from any industry. Just look at the things that you used to have to hire people to do that you don't hire people to do anymore because the technology does it for you.
Yeah.
It's and the media and advertising and production business is second only to the computer business as far as its disruption by technology. It was a McKinsey study that I read a while ago. So it's those challenges are, created a lot of opportunities in that space. And that's, for me, that's interesting, the challenges and the changing and stuff like that. I'm comfortable with that. There's some people that don't like change. Well, I don't know if that's just because of the industry I'm in, I like it, but, personally, it's just, there's a lot of opportunities in the space. Right
I want to ask you about these new challenges with your new company now. We're running a little short on time. So, before I do that, what after 18 years, why did you decide to step aside from Alchemy?
Well, I had been talking to the owners about the future of the company, really getting it to the next level. And, I felt very strongly, in a certain direction that the company needs to go to, which is really move away from being a production-centric organization and really become more of an agency, because I felt that our work was starting to get commoditized. And the same thing was happening like in the TV show. The agencies now were starting to do all their work in-house, all the stuff in-house, who were a lot of our customers. So I made so we had a discussion about me even potentially buying the company from them. Needless to say, that didn't pan out the way it was going to. So they, essentially bought me out of my contract, and I had a small ownership position. And I took that and decided it was time to, move on, from there. So, it I guess you can say it was a difficult decision. Myself and probably 3 or 4 other people built that company for the guys that owned the company. Everybody has left now, has moved on to do other things. And I think it's actually worked out for everybody, from that standpoint. I mean, it was just, we were, the company really needed to do a major pivot, in my opinion. And I didn't want to I always, my success was based on not trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And that's really what we were up against. We just didn't fit the marketplace, and we needed to change. So,
right.
And they didn't think so much. So,
yeah. What is it like starting over again, building up AmpiFLY from the ground up?
As expected, a lot of challenges, a lot of things going on, a lot of explaining to people what we do and why we do it. But what's great about it is a blank sheet of paper. So, we can, there's not a lot of, I guess I shouldn't say legacy baggage when it comes to, to that. That's a good thing about, a startup. The bad thing about a startup is there's not any legacy. From that standpoint, you don't have anything to build off of or pivot out of. So, but obviously COVID and some other things has caused some challenges, but, so far so good, I guess you would say.
Yeah. What are you excited about when it comes to, why go into these brand new areas like augmented reality, virtual reality? What gets you excited about it, and why delve into these new areas when you had a lot of success in more traditional video production?
Well, I've done, if you think about it, we started a visual effects company from scratch. So I'm used to sort of jumping into brand new tech driven areas. I'm very comfortable with technology, always have been. Very interested in it, and I felt that there were some opportunities in that space. Virtual reality and augmented reality, are tools that you can use to really, help tell some sort of story for a brand. Virtual reality, I think, works really well for trade shows and for possibly some training or entertainment, or tours and things like that. But I think it's also challenging for brands because it doesn't do as straight kind of advertising as you think it would be, especially at the front of the sales funnel, unless it's like somebody's already decided they want to buy a car and they want to look around the inside and things like that. It works that way. Augmented reality, I'm a lot more bullish on when it comes to advertising, because essentially it's a digital bridge if you think about it. So, somebody with a physical product or a physical space or someplace points their phone at a product, and you can pipe them anything digitally that you want with that augmented reality. It can be a video, it can be a coupon, be anything you want. So it's interesting. It's just both of those are just other ways of distributing content, if you think about it. Just a way of repackaging video content. Augmented reality is a little bit more, I would look at it, virtual reality look a little bit more as sort of more visual effects kind of driven. So that's why I'm sort of comfortable there. But augmented reality is more of a tool, I guess you would say, to deliver content. You just got to know what kind of content works and what you want to package in there and what you're really trying to accomplish. It's not so much to be, people say, oh, wouldn't this be cool to do this? Well, what's the brand trying to do? What are they trying to say? What's the business goal by doing that? And how can you solve that problem or have them take advantage of that opportunity by using that stuff?
For augmented reality, what are some examples of some companies that are doing it really well?
I think that there are a lot of companies that are out there that are, that are doing it and trying to do it. There's something, and I'm forgetting, I just read something, I think it was the NFL. It might've been Major League Baseball. I'm not sure which one it was, that are, doing it to deliver tickets, so you can be watching, you can be watching a broadcast at home and you can point your phone at the TV and buy tickets. Automatically, things like that. So that's it's a very simple application, but it's a digital bridge if you think about it.
If I think about it, I mean, so these weird COVID times that we're in right now, I dropped off my son at preschool this morning, and they have a QR code on the wall when I check him in. He's doing his hand sanitizer and stuff, and he's 4, and I have to point my phone at the wall and this QR code, and it pops up a little survey form that I have to fill out each morning. So does that count?
Yes, it's a form of augmented reality. Yeah,
right.
It's not quite the same. It's really augmented reality tends to overlay something on. So in other words, if you pointed your phone at the school, you can create an augmented reality where you don't even need the QR code in it. And then what would happen, it would come up and it would show you all the data of how many kids are in school, how many kids are out sick, you know, all that kind of stuff. Here's a message from the principal. Yeah. It'll pop up and you can watch right there, you know, things like that. So that's really, okay, I want content that this school is putting out in the digital space, and the augmented app triggers it for you.
Yeah.
Now
or museums, I think are, you know, adding more interesting content like that, or retail spaces.
It's also an interesting thing for, you know, for apartments and things like that. If somebody's advertising for, you know, apartment space in a printed publication or on a website or things like that, you know, a magazine, you know, old school kind of print, you know, they can point their phone. I've seen this where they point their phone at that ad. Yeah. The ad doesn't even, I mean, there's just a little code. The ad is coded. It's not a QR code. It just looks at that ad and it knows it's got a target there. You know, pops up, you know, okay, well, which one do you want to look at? And, you know, they'll show you a 3D tour stuff. And you could even, you know, so it's just a different way of connecting everybody to a website or some other content or a 3D model or whatever. And it just floats over the top of the ad, you know, it's just there. So it's just a cool way. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, it's Pokemon on steroids. You know,
I mean, I can see how there's going to be much more and more of that. Well, we're running a little short on time, but I want to wrap up the question that I always ask, Ray, which is, let's pretend we're at an awards banquet, much like the Oscars or the Emmys, and you're receiving an award for lifetime achievement for everything you've done up until this point. And what we all want to know is, who do you thank, in addition to, you know, family and friends? Who are the mentors? Who are the coaches? Who are the business partners? Who are the peers? Who are the people that you would acknowledge in your remarks?
Well, I would start. I mean, one of the people I would start with is my father, he's always been a really good business mentor to mine. He's the one that really, you know, has always been, you know, a servant leader and all that kind of stuff. And just watching him growing up made a big difference in my career. We mentioned Campbell's. I would say David Johnson and some of the other executives there had a huge impact on my career. You know, Mark Summers, obviously, you know, from that standpoint. You know, there's, you know, the people that work with me at, you know, that was at Shooters is really about, just without mentioning, there was like 8 core people that really built the company with me, everything from sales and creative people and things like that. So those are people that had a huge impact. Even Lewis, you know, I knew Lewis when we first got on the Inc. list. You know, Lewis had a really big impact on making me think very differently about companies and business. And he had, you know, all those people had impact on my success, you know, from that.
All right. So AmpiFLY is the name of the new business. Where can people go to learn more about you, Ray?
It would be AmpiFLY.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, and it's AmpiFLY.com.
Excellent. All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution. Revolution. And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.